The champagne bottle shattered against the fiberglass hull at exactly 2:14 on a Sunday afternoon. My mother cheered loudly and raised her crystal glass toward the sun. The boat was a custom twin-engine luxury cruiser. It carried a retail value of $412,850. I knew this exact figure because I was staring at my mobile banking portal. My grandfather's educational trust account showed a remaining balance of $12.14. My name is Victor, and I am 29 years old. I live in the corporate financial district of Miami. I work as a Senior Asset Structuring Analyst for a commercial real estate firm. I specialize in distressed debt acquisition and commercial mortgage-backed securities. I analyze high-risk capital loans and execute structural foreclosures. My parents named their stolen vessel the Endless Summer. They were currently posing for photographs on the polished teak deck. I did not scream or confront them in front of the yacht club members. I simply stood on the wooden dock and reviewed the digital transaction ledger. The massive withdrawal was executed using a fraudulent, irrevocable proxy transfer. They exploited a dormant custodial loophole to liquidate my financial foundation. If you discovered your parents stole your future to purchase a recreational watercraft, where exactly would you be standing? What exact time would it be? Let me tell you exactly where I was. I was standing in the shade of a rented marquee tent. I was looking at the specific routing numbers that drained my trust. My parents assumed I would accept this massive financial violation as a family tax. They believed their local social status superseded my basic legal rights. They thought my quiet demeanor meant I was permanently compliant. They deeply misunderstood the cold nature of my absolute silence. My mind was not paralyzed by a sudden deep emotional shock. I was actively mentally mapping the precise legal architecture of their complete financial ruin. They bought a depreciating luxury asset with illegally stolen capital. This lavish lifestyle rested entirely upon a foundation of severe financial fraud. I closed my mobile banking application and quietly walked away from the sunny marina. I refused to speak a single word to them for the next 5 years. Those 60 months were spent acquiring the specific commercial debt, anchoring their entire existence. I was preparing a quiet masterclass in leveraged asset recovery. My family operates on a deeply flawed concept of communal equity. They believe my grandfather's wealth was a collective family reservoir. They completely ignored the strict legal stipulations of the generational trust. My grandfather established that fund specifically for my advanced education and professional equity. He funded it with exactly $412,000 before he passed away. My parents have always lived in a constant state of severe over-leverage. My father works as an independent boutique luxury real estate broker. He relies entirely on highly volatile commission structures to fund a lavish lifestyle. My mother is a professional socialite who views extreme debt as a temporary inconvenience. Whenever their aggressive credit card utilization reached critical limits, they deployed heavy emotional manipulation. They would sit me down and frame their severe financial negligence as a shared family sacrifice. My mother constantly told me that true family never tracks the internal flow of money. She claimed my analytical mindset was fundamentally ungrateful and deeply selfish. She used this aggressive gaslighting to normalize their constant extraction of my personal resources. Before the luxury boat purchase, I absorbed thousands of dollars in their manufactured crises. I covered a $14,000 property tax deficit to save their previous home. I paid exactly $6,000 to quietly settle my father's defaulted country club membership. They drained my trust fund because they secured a massive luxury penthouse downtown. The property carried a primary mortgage of exactly $2,100,000. They needed massive liquid capital to maintain the illusion of elite status. They rationalized stealing my trust by claiming they were protecting our social standing. They believed I would accept the theft and eventually secure a high-paying corporate job. They assumed I would become their permanent private bank to fund their future shortfalls. They were completely correct about my future corporate earning potential. I became a highly aggressive specialist in corporate asset structuring and debt recovery. I spent the next 5 years silently monitoring their public financial records. I did not engage in pointless screaming matches or demand a hollow apology. I watched their primary mortgage get packaged into a massive commercial collateralized debt obligation. I tracked the exact institutional routing numbers of their underwater penthouse asset. They built a towering castle of debt directly on top of my stolen future. I was preparing to systematically dismantle every single brick. My parents completely misunderstood the reality of my corporate position. They assumed I was a basic mid-level analyst inputting generic data into meaningless daily spreadsheets. They frequently called me during working hours to demand free and highly complex financial consulting. My father would text me complicated tax documents regarding his volatile real estate commissions. He expected me to quietly balance his chaotic ledgers without asking any questions. I completed this unseen labor strictly to maintain my hidden access to his exact financial metrics. My actual daily reality revolves around a highly proprietary institutional debt trading terminal. This specialized system grants me direct operational access to secondary commercial debt markets worldwide. Through this specific terminal, I track bundled mortgage securities and highly complex distressed asset portfolios. I monitor the exact mathematical performance metrics of heavily leveraged luxury real estate. If a property owner misses a critical payment, my dashboard flashes a bright crimson alert. I can purchase the fundamental debt of an entire building with a single verified keystroke. This simply means I buy the right to collect the primary mortgage or take the property. My parents financed their massive luxury penthouse through a highly predatory adjustable-rate primary mortgage. The initial loan was bundled into a complex residential mortgage-backed security tranche. 2 years ago, their specific debt portfolio was flagged for severe high-risk corporate restructuring. My firm operates a specialized private equity fund designed to acquire these exact distressed tranches. I quietly positioned my internal capital to purchase the specific mezzanine debt layer holding their penthouse. This highly specific financial maneuver required 3 months of relentless and totally invisible administrative backroom labor. My parents genuinely believed their primary mortgage was held by a massive and faceless national bank. They naturally assumed a massive institution would easily overlook their constant late payments and minor defaults. They completely failed to comprehend the extremely aggressive mechanics of secondary debt acquisition. The national bank sold their compromised mortgage simply to minimize its own internal corporate risk exposure. I became the dedicated special servicer officially assigned to manage and enforce their exact debt portfolio. I effectively owned the foundational legal paper dictating whether they kept their expensive home or faced eviction. They interpreted my absolute and continuous silence as a pathetic form of total personal defeat. They never once realized I actively and secretly owned the entire structural cage surrounding their fake opulent life. My parents completely misunderstood the reality of my corporate position. They assumed I was a basic mid-level analyst inputting generic data into meaningless daily spreadsheets. They frequently called me during working hours to demand free and highly complex financial consulting. My father would text me complicated tax documents regarding his volatile real estate commissions. He expected me to quietly balance his chaotic ledgers without asking any questions. I completed this unseen labor strictly to maintain my hidden access to his exact financial metrics. My actual daily reality revolves around a highly proprietary institutional debt trading terminal. This specialized system grants me direct operational access to secondary commercial debt markets worldwide. Through this specific terminal, I track bundled mortgage securities and highly complex distressed asset portfolios. I monitor the exact mathematical performance metrics of heavily leveraged luxury real estate. If a property owner misses a critical payment, my dashboard flashes a bright crimson alert. I can purchase the fundamental debt of an entire building with a single verified keystroke. This simply means I buy the right to collect the primary mortgage or take the property. My parents financed their massive luxury penthouse through a highly predatory adjustable-rate primary mortgage. The initial loan was bundled into a complex residential mortgage-backed security tranche. 2 years ago, their specific debt portfolio was flagged for severe high-risk corporate restructuring. My firm operates a specialized private equity fund designed to acquire these exact distressed tranches. I quietly positioned my internal capital to purchase the specific mezzanine debt layer holding their penthouse. This highly specific financial maneuver required 3 months of relentless and totally invisible administrative backroom labor. My parents genuinely believed their primary mortgage was held by a massive and faceless national bank. They naturally assumed a massive institution would easily overlook their constant late payments and minor defaults. They completely failed to comprehend the extremely aggressive mechanics of secondary debt acquisition. The national bank sold their compromised mortgage simply to minimize its own internal corporate risk exposure. I became the dedicated special servicer officially assigned to manage and enforce their exact debt portfolio. I effectively owned the foundational legal paper dictating whether they kept their expensive home or faced eviction. They interpreted my absolute and continuous silence as a pathetic form of total personal defeat. They never once realized I actively and secretly owned the entire structural cage surrounding their fake opulent life. The total panic erupted exactly 72 hours after I triggered the master acceleration clause. It began at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. My phone screen illuminated with an incoming call from my father. I allowed the call to route directly to my secure corporate voicemail. He left a highly frantic 3-minute message regarding a massive and terrifying legal document he just received. He explained that a rogue corporate entity was aggressively demanding nearly $2 million in immediate payment. He desperately commanded me to utilize my institutional network to identify the malicious corporate actors involved. I quietly archived the frantic voice message and completely ignored his directive. My mother initiated the extreme secondary escalation phase 10 minutes later. She aggressively deployed a heavy barrage of consecutive text messages in rapid succession. The texts were completely unhinged and lacked any form of coherent punctuation. She demanded to know why their secondary home equity credit line was suddenly freezing her platinum cards. She had attempted to purchase a highly expensive designer handbag and faced a deeply humiliating public decline. She frantically tried to frame the aggressive credit freeze as a minor technical glitch with the bank. She completely refused to acknowledge the sudden and massive notice of default resting on her dining table. At exactly 5:15, my father finally bypassed my silence and called my direct office line. I answered the phone on the third ring to establish a completely neutral baseline power dynamic. He was entirely hysterical and speaking in a highly elevated and completely frantic cadence. He screamed that their entire lifestyle was under a sudden and highly coordinated malicious attack. He demanded I immediately transfer $80,000 from my personal accounts to unfreeze their credit lines. I remained completely silent until he paused to take a sudden and desperate gasping breath. I spoke in a low and extremely highly measured corporate cadence. I coldly informed him I could not authorize the arbitrary transfer of personal liquid capital. I explained that standard banking regulations prohibit employees from manually overriding automated institutional credit locks. The aggressive gaslighting immediately intensified to a massive and highly severe degree. My father claimed family always provides emergency financial liquidity, regardless of banking protocol. My mother suddenly merged onto the active call and deployed her classic heavy emotional guilt tactics. She loudly stated that my analytical detachment was deeply unnatural and heavily toxic to the family structure. She commanded me to fix the massive administrative error right this instant or face total family exile. I calmly declined her specific and highly ridiculous operational directive. I stated clearly that my personal financial infrastructure was permanently unavailable for their continued gross exploitation. I actively terminated the call and manually placed both of their cell numbers on a strict silent routing protocol. My parents instantly attempted to bypass my strict boundaries and manually resolve the massive financial crisis. They naturally assumed they could deploy basic emotional manipulation on a major institutional servicing agent. This was a catastrophic tactical error based entirely on deep and highly severe systemic ignorance. Corporate foreclosure departments do not care about manufactured family drama or fake socialite status. Specialized debt servicers care exclusively about verified liquid capital and rigid institutional compliance structures. My father confidently marched into the lobby of his local retail bank branch on Monday morning. He arrogantly attempted to negotiate a new loan modification with a basic junior teller. He assumed his local luxury, real estate credentials would force the bank into instant and total compliance. He severely failed to realize the local retail branch possessed absolutely zero operational jurisdiction. The junior teller informed my father his primary mortgage was entirely owned by a specialized private equity fund. My firm held the exclusive legal right to enforce the specific master acceleration clause. Furthermore, my father lacked the massive required liquidity to satisfy the immediate demand for $2 million. The teller was forced to publicly deny his modification request in the middle of a crowded banking lobby. Meanwhile, my mother aggressively attempted to leverage her fake social status to secure emergency bridge loans. She quietly contacted several of her wealthy yacht club friends and begged for immediate quiet capital. She leveraged her aesthetic vision and cried in the private dining room of her exclusive country club. The elite members remained completely and entirely unsympathetic to her manufactured and highly pathetic financial crisis. Elite social circles operate on strict financial optics and instantly abandon heavily compromised members. They handed my mother a polite but firm absolute rejection. Provide the required capital yourself or face total permanent social exile. The most devastating blow to their desperate contingency plans arrived via an independent commercial appraiser. Because the primary asset was now officially in terminal default, my firm required an immediate localized valuation. I dispatched a highly aggressive commercial inspector to their luxury penthouse on Wednesday afternoon. The inspector demanded absolute and unrestricted access to photograph every single room for the massive foreclosure dossier. My parents were completely trapped inside their own expensive home, while a stranger documented their impending total ruin. I sat calmly at my desk and monitored the systemic failure through my highly proprietary vendor portal. I was actively gathering extreme and highly specific administrative receipts. Every time a bank logged a rejection notice or a socialite declined a loan, I generated a PDF timestamp. I compiled a massive comprehensive dossier of their complete and total financial incompetence. I documented the exact timeline of how their stolen luxury lifestyle caused the massive systemic collapse. They tried to build a high-vibration elite experience on a foundation of pure extreme exploitation. They had stolen my future to purchase a boat. Now they were completely trapped beneath the crushing absolute weight of a $2 million foreclosure. The structural collapse was absolute, completely perfect, and totally irreversible. The massive systemic collapse forced my parents into a temporary and highly calculated strategic retreat. By Thursday evening, their entire fake luxury infrastructure was completely and permanently dead. The primary penthouse asset was locked in an aggressive and terminal commercial foreclosure process. Their massive secondary home equity credit lines were completely frozen by strict institutional mandates. The elite social circles had completely abandoned them due to the toxic optics of severe financial failure. My parents had exactly zero remaining liquid capital and absolutely nowhere to deploy their massive fake influence. My mother initiated the false truce protocol via a highly desperate group text message. She requested an immediate emergency summit at my downtown apartment to negotiate a final absolute resolution. She promised full financial transparency and absolute accountability for the previous deep misunderstandings. I recognized this specific tactic instantly from years of highly toxic behavioral patterns. It was the classic parental maneuver designed to force a reluctant financial compliance through sheer physical proximity. They fully believed if they occupied my personal space, they could easily break my analytical detachment. They intended to deploy a massive wave of extreme emotional guilt to shatter my rigid corporate boundaries. I agreed to the emergency summit. I did not agree because I intended to reinstate their massive fake luxury framework. I agreed strictly because I wanted to observe their absolute desperation from a position of total financial supremacy. They arrived at my secure apartment at exactly 8:15 in the evening. My father looked physically exhausted and deeply, intensely angry. My mother carried a highly expensive bottle of imported wine as a completely pathetic peace offering. They sat heavily on my leather sofa and instantly launched into a massive and highly rehearsed performance. My mother spoke first. She utilized a soft and deeply manipulative high-pitched vocal register. She told me the family was fundamentally broken without my highly stable corporate presence. She claimed she was intensely remorseful regarding the sudden loss of my grandfather's educational trust fund. My father then aggressively deployed the massive heavy financial guilt pressure. He stated that the family would face total and absolute public ruin if the foreclosure proceeded. He aggressively demanded I utilize my elite professional network to somehow force the corporate servicer back online. He even promised to sign a legally binding promissory note to slowly repay the stolen trust fund money. They presented this massive, complete fabrication as a highly legitimate and extremely honorable business negotiation. I sat calmly in my armchair and listened to their massive, desperate symphony of lies. I did not touch the expensive imported wine. I knew they possessed absolutely zero liquidity to back a legitimate and binding promissory note. I knew my mother only regretted the severe systemic failure and not the actual massive theft. They were not seeking a genuine and total reconciliation of our deeply severed dynamic. They were merely trying to reactivate their permanent private bank for a massive emergency bailout. They needed massive liquid capital. They did not need a son. I maintained total eye contact and allowed the absolute silence to stretch for a painfully long time. The absolute silence in my apartment stretched into a profound and heavily suffocating tension. My mother finally broke the quiet by demanding an immediate timeline for the massive corporate bailout. She aggressively pulled out a small notebook and sharply clicked her expensive silver pen. She fully expected me to dictate the complex emergency financial recovery sequence. She expected me to call the faceless corporate servicer and negotiate a massive delay on a Thursday night. I did not reach for my mobile phone. I calmly reached for the sleek black folder resting on my heavy glass coffee table. I opened the thick folder and slowly extracted the massive comprehensive administrative dossier I had compiled. I handed the first heavy document directly to my father. It was the formal internal servicing record confirming my exact corporate firm owned his specific compromised debt. I handed the second heavy document to my mother. It was the exact internal digital signature authorizing the massive master acceleration clause. I handed the final highly specific document to both of them simultaneously. It was a printed copy of the exact fraudulent irrevocable proxy transfer they used to drain my trust. I precisely highlighted the specific routing numbers matching the purchase of their massive luxury boat. Are you tracking this exact specific timeline? Have you ever watched a massive fake reality shatter in absolute real time? My father stared at the internal servicing record with complete and utter total incomprehension. He began to loudly and aggressively demand a coherent explanation for my massive corporate sabotage. I stopped him immediately. I spoke with absolute and completely terrifying clinical precision. I coldly informed them there was absolutely no emergency financial recovery sequence to dictate. I explained that massive high-capacity institutional debt does not operate on fake emotional apologies or useless promissory notes. I told them the specialized private equity fund would never allow an insolvent debtor to maintain a luxury asset. I confirmed I was the exact dedicated special servicer permanently assigned to enforce their total ruin. My mother finally dropped her expensive silver pen. She began to scream with a massive ferocity that aggressively shook the apartment windows. She accused me of meticulously planning this massive absolute destruction for years out of pure deep malice. She violently lunged toward the heavy coffee table and aggressively swept the black folder onto the floor. My father stood up and aggressively pointed his shaking finger directly at my chest. He told me I was a deeply cold and calculating sociopath who cared more about spreadsheets than blood. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice a single decibel. I simply stood up and walked calmly to my apartment door. I opened it wide and stepped completely aside. I told them the massive negotiation was officially and permanently concluded. I stated that they possessed exactly 15 days to completely vacate the massive luxury penthouse. I coldly reminded them that the massive twin-engine luxury cruiser was currently anchored at a heavily monitored public marina. The ultimate truth was completely undeniable. They had demanded a massive high-vibration luxury aesthetic entirely built on severe fraud. I merely provided them exactly the strict mathematical consequences they actively created. They walked out of my apartment in a stunned and completely absolute heavy silence. The door closed with a deeply satisfying final click. The systemic collapse was absolute, heavily public, and mathematically precise. Exactly 15 days after our final meeting, the formal institutional eviction mandate was executed. At 8 in the morning, 2 armed county sheriffs arrived at their massive luxury penthouse. They carefully supervised the immediate installation of heavy industrial corporate padlocks on the primary custom oak doors. My parents were legally restricted to removing only fundamental personal clothing and basic essential medications. They left behind nearly $2 million of highly leveraged custom Italian furniture and completely worthless aesthetic art. The secondary collateral collapse targeted their stolen twin-engine luxury cruiser. Because they possessed zero liquid capital to maintain the severe monthly marina docking fees, the vessel was formally seized. The exclusive Yacht Club administration placed a hard maritime lien on the custom fiberglass hull. It was quickly auctioned in a private distressed sale for exactly $214,000. That highly specific sum barely covered their outstanding local civic liabilities and defaulted revolving credit lines. The professional devastation hit my father with immediate and catastrophic force. He operated as an independent luxury real estate broker reliant on extreme local optics. When his elite clientele discovered his primary penthouse was repossessed by a corporate servicer, his reputation completely died. You cannot sell extreme luxury when your personal residential profile actively displays a massive commercial foreclosure. His active residential listings were systematically transferred to competing local agents within exactly 72 consecutive business hours. My mother was permanently exiled from her elite Miami social committee. The local gossip network quickly uncovered the undeniable truth regarding the heavily frozen home equity lines. She went from being a highly respected socialite to a complete administrative pariah overnight. Her Platinum Country Club memberships were publicly and permanently revoked due to severe and chronic non-payment. They attempted to bombard my phone with furious text messages threatening massive civil lawsuits. I completely ignored every single incoming notification. They possessed zero legal standing to sue me for executing a standard institutional foreclosure protocol. They had built an elaborate financial house of cards entirely on my stolen generational trust fund. When the active corporate debt market aggressively shifted, the massive resulting vacuum crushed them completely. They were finally experiencing the true and completely unfiltered cost of their relentless and deeply toxic financial fraud. The aftermath of the massive foreclosure brought a profound and unfamiliar silence to my life. I did not experience a triumphant surge of aggressive emotional joy. I did not celebrate their total systemic ruin with a lavish dinner. I simply felt an absolute and highly clinical peace. The perpetual and massive drain on my personal resources was permanently sealed. I updated my highly secure personal banking portal on a quiet Monday morning. I locked my corporate asset structuring profile to strict professional use only. The toxic familial ledger was finally zeroed out forever. My mother completely stopped calling to demand emergency bridge loans. My father officially deactivated all his social media profiles to hide from the massive public humiliation. They finally understood the cold reality of the severe financial boundary I established. They realized they could no longer extract unearned value from my logistical competence. My stolen trust fund was technically gone forever. However, I extracted exact and proportional payment in total institutional leverage. Their $2 million residential facade completely shattered against the hard concrete of reality. I did not need to raise my voice to demand deep respect. I only needed a fast, secure internet connection and absolute unyielding discipline. The complex equation perfectly balanced itself. Do you understand the true ultimate value of cold mathematical patience? Can you see how absolute silence is the most devastating corporate weapon? I am 29 years old. I live in the corporate financial district of Miami. I execute structural foreclosures and manage complex distressed debt portfolios. My parents aggressively stole my entire future to purchase a custom luxury cruiser. I simply provided them the completely undeniable consequences of a severely broken leverage model. They stole a recreational boat, so I quietly seized their entire fake world.